Good morning, Christian Church of Milford. Hey, we are nearly done with this coronavirus stay-at-home order. And until we are completely there, we're still doing some of the video recordings. And as you've had to watch me do this, you know I'm not very good in front of the camera. I struggle when I don't have real people to relate to. And so I apologize for that inconvenience. But I've been working on a lot of different things for us to communicate. And one of the things that I feel like we've been running into is people asking significant questions about what God is doing. Where is God? Why is there suffering? Why is all this going on? And we don't have all the answers, but we know that all the answers begin with God, a relationship with Him, and that means it begins with the gospel and somebody actually having the Spirit of Christ dwelling in them. And it made me think we need a tool that we as a congregation can utilize for the sharing of the gospel when people have questions. Just a way of keeping our thoughts in order so that we hit the most important points and don't get distracted by peripheral things like end time scenarios and interpretations on particular minor words, endless questions that have been going on for thousands of years without resolution. These are not going to help us. And so I created this simple tool that you can download from www.christianchurchofmilford.com and make it yourself. You should have received one in the mail. I've got one right here with you, and I just want to show you how it works and how easy it is to put together. First of all, it looks like this, two sides like that. What you want to do is locate this one right here. That's going to go up. So turn it down, fold it up, fold along the top line, the long line. Do that again. See, it's still up. See? And now you've got this. This is in the middle. One more time. There we go. Quick staple. Then slice the fold at the top and slice the two pages on the side. You don't have to have a handy dandy multi-tool like I usually carry, but if you want, they're awfully handy. And see, now we've got the booklet. A lot of times in presenting the gospel, it's really a matter of how much time you've got to go into it and a framework of thinking through the process of what are the important points. It's not that the gospel is difficult. In fact, it's so simple that a child can understand it, but it is so amazingly responsive to the needs of our heart that when you are explaining it to somebody in a real relationship with them where you care about them, you will often get off onto side conversations and you'll want to be able to come back to, okay, what was that basic framework that helps me hold the ideas of the gospel together? And so I've given you one that's color-coded to our logo, and it simply says, God created us, but sin broke us. Jesus chose us, and we must choose Him. And when we do, we will grow to be like Him, and we will go to be with Him. There it is. There's the framework. God created us. Sin broke us. Jesus chose us. We choose Him. When we do, we grow. When we do, we will go. And so each of those basic points is broken out in the middle of the booklet in a God. Who do we mean by God? He is the God of heaven, goodness, and light. What do we mean that He did? He created not only us, but our reality, our planet. He created that planet so that we could have a place to grow, to love, and to work in relationships with Him and other people. But sin broke us. We'll want to talk about what sin is, and it's not just the list of things that we do that are wrong. And because of this, God immediately began trying to fix the problem with sin, and that's what most of the Old Testament is about, not necessarily fixing it, but almost eliminating the natural ways that we think it could be fixed, so that what we are left with is one way to God through the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus chose us. He's not a martyr. He didn't go unwillingly to the cross, but he opened up a new covenant way for us to relate to God. And so part of the gospel, the good news, is how that new covenant works. And when we live by faith in the person of Jesus according to the new covenant, we will naturally grow to be more like him. And the Holy Spirit is given to us to accomplish that. And it's not just a matter of waiting and twiddling our spiritual thumbs until he returns or we die and go to be with him in heaven. Though those are real promises, we begin growing immediately until that final conclusion to our life and this part of the human story is told. And so we want to go through page by page this idea of who exactly is God? And so as we talk about that, we realize that, well, we believe the Bible. And the Bible presents God in a particular way. He has a multitude of names. He gave his first name, Yahweh is one way of pronouncing it. Jehovah is another way of pronouncing it. But honestly, we don't even know how to pronounce it because the vowels from the original revelation of what God's name is, the vowels have been removed so that people won't take his name in vain. And so what we are left with are 4 consonants, YHWH in the Hebrew alphabet, and from that is the perfect name of God, the proper name of God, and we typically in the English translations of the Bible translate that as the Lord. Now, personally, I'm a little bothered that we take somebody's proper name and turn it into a title, but that's what we've done. That's what we have. And so when you see the Lord throughout the Old Testament, that is the proper name of God. I like Yahweh. There are groups that are very emphatic that the name is Jehovah and it should be pronounced Jehovah. Whatever. He is a real person, unlimited power, unrestricted by time. The God of the Bible is a real person with a real name with whom we can have a real relationship, and while he is not like us, we are like him. What that means is that the notions of God that are very popular are ruled out from the very beginning of the discussion. He is not a God, just another way of talking about ancient religions and ideas about gods who made us and rule us. It's not like that. He is not a God. He is not a mystic power. The Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, that good and evil are equal opposites. The Force from Star Wars is very much a Eastern mystical idea of a supernatural relationship that has a will and yet no personality. That is not what we're talking about when we talk about God at all. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, so from the very beginning of what we think of as history, God. Now you say, oh, it goes on. Yeah, it does go on. But the very first point of the gospel is who we're talking about, and that is God. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. Wow, what a power-packed concept. But it begins with God. God created a universe of order and purpose for many of the same reasons that we create and fill our worlds with order and purpose. Again, not because God is like us, but because we are like him. We understand why someone would create things. Now, we're going to argue and debate on how he did it. The Genesis account of 7 literal days of creation is a way of explaining how God did it. But because our frame of reference is very limited, very restricted by time, We're not even going to understand it if he gave us more details on how he did it. But the why he did it was for self-expression and love. He loved who he is and wanted to express that. He loved us and wanted us to have a place to live. That's all we really need to know. And so as we read through, we find in Psalm 19 the idea that the heavens declare the glory of God. We find in Romans 1 that everything that we need to know begins with understanding that God created, and as we look at that creation, we begin to want to be in relationship with Him. But if we try to explain that away so that we retain our freedom independent of Him, He gives us over to more and more sin. God created us in His image to work, grow, learn, and thrive in fellowship with Him and with one another. We are social beings. This social distancing is a problem for us because it goes against our very nature to thrive in relationship with other people. When God created us, He created us male and female. Men and women are equal, but we are necessary parts of what it means to be human. There's been a lot of discussion and argument over what we mean when we say God created man. Oh, just males? No, males and females. He created us in His image, sentient spirit beings that dwell in these physical bodies for now. We are the spirit, the image of God placed in these temporary bodies so that we can live in a relational and emotional reality where we have freedom of choice. We were entrusted with one of the most important parts of the image of God, and that being freedom of choice. This is a dangerous trust. I think a lot of times people have said, why can't God just make us good? If He really loves us, why not just make us so we don't do things that are wrong? Actually, He loves us too much to take away that freedom of choice. And with the freedom of choice comes the opportunity to experience unpleasant consequences when we make bad choices. Whether the choice is between life and death, we choose death, we are choosing that which is not consistent with God and His character. He allows us to choose between good and evil. And I like the idea that there are two different kinds of opposites. There is a necessary opposite. Up requires down. Left is meaningless without right. East, west, these dimensional necessary opposites mean that you can't have one without the other. But not every kind of opposite requires the other extreme. Light and darkness. Light is a real thing. We debate what it is, how it impacts reality. In the beginning, the first thing that God created was light, and that was all it was for the first day. And with that began the opportunity to convert matter into energy, energy into matter, the ability for time to progress. Light is a thing. Darkness is merely the word that we use to talk about the absence of the thing. Hot and cold. Again, we say that I got cold. No, you didn't get cold. What you lost was heat, because heat is the thing. And there's only so much heat that you can lose before you reach an absolute state of cold. But light can just keep growing and going. Love and hate. Love is the thing. Hate is what we use to talk about the absence of love. And so good and evil are not necessary opposites. They are the kind of opposite where good is the thing that is like God. Evil is the thing that is the rejection of God. And so he gave us choice. And in that initial round of choice, we had just one choice to make. Eat from that tree or don't eat from that tree. We ate from the tree. And the results were what I call genetic brain damage. We were sinful in that we rejected God's will, but we are also, as a result, a broken species, and so sin broke us. That's what we mean by the problem of sin. It's not the list of things that we do that are wrong. It's the way that we're broken. So, if sin is understood to be the rejection of God and his goodness, rather than simply a list of things that we do wrong, we can begin to understand the Old Testament as a story of how God interacted with broken humanity in a way of bringing them back into relationship with him. And in that process, he ends up answering a lot of the go-to solutions that we might have come up with and proving that that doesn't work in dealing with the problem of our sin. The story of Noah could easily be understood as an attempt to fix the problem by eliminating all the bad people. It's those people that are the problem. No, it's not those people. It's what they do that's the problem. No, it's not them. It's all of us. And so the attempt to eliminate bad people is not a solution that actually works. And God says at the end of it, through a covenant, a contract, an arrangement, that I will never purge the world of broken humans again, because that doesn't fix the problem. Parents sometimes think that by setting an example with one child and really lavishing attention on that one child, the rest of the children will behave. And so with Abraham, we could look at the whole story and what was done with Abraham as an attempt of fixing the problem by choosing one group of people, one family, for God to lavish his blessings on them, in the idea that he would set an example of what being in fellowship and following God would, how that would be a blessing. And what we find out is, no, that doesn't work either. Spoiled children come from too much blessing, and the other children don't look and go, ooh, I want to be like that. They just get angry and try to wipe out that child. At least that's been the story of the children of Israel who descended from Abraham. Maybe the problem could be fixed if we say God just needs to be really clear on what he wants us to do, and then we would do it. I don't know. I found myself thinking the problem is God hasn't told me what his will is. And if he would just tell me his will, then I would do it. It doesn't work that way. I'm not good enough to simply want to do what God tells me I ought to do. And so the story of Moses and the Ten Commandments and all of the expectations of the old law could be perceived as God's attempt to fix things by being really clear on what he wants us to do. It doesn't work. Maybe the problem's government. If there would just be a really good king with a really great government, then everybody would just fall in line and do what they ought to do. We never hear anybody say, oh, if government would step in, everything would be better. No, that never gets said. Yeah, it does. We think that's a solution, and the whole story of David could be perceived as an effort to show that fixing the problem of sin through government doesn't work either. And so as we wrap up the Old Testament, what we understand is that all of these things have been tried and didn't work. But we end the Old Testament with a period of 400 years of silence and a few promises. all the way back to Adam and that first covenant, we are left with a promise that a son would be born of woman who would crush the serpent's head. We are left with a promise that never again would a purge of broken humanity be attempted as a way of fixing the problem of sin. We are left with the promise that the blessing to faithful Abraham would be extended to all nations and not just to the children of Israel. We are left with the promise that the requirements of blood atonement would finally be satisfied so that blood sacrifices would not be expected either to establish covenant relationships or to atone for sin under pre-existing covenants. We're left with a promise that a son of David would rise and take the throne of Israel. And finally, we are left with the promise that a new covenant would be established to replace the old covenant of Moses. And so we end the first part of the Bible with all of these promises that God will in fact redeem his people. There will be a son of David to take the throne, a Messiah. There will be a new relationship with humanity that isn't dependent on blood sacrifice.